This is Randy Sullivan, the host of Bourbon Real Talk. I grew up in a small town and went to a small church where everyone looked and thought like me. Over the years, I've gotten to know and love people from all different walks of life. This has made my world bigger and richer. The secret ingredient in forming those relationships was getting to know people's real stories. That helped me to identify with them, have compassion on them, and eventually develop a real connection with them. We live in a disconnected world today, and I want to do everything in my power to build connections between individuals who may not have attempted friendship otherwise. I've observed this happening in the bourbon community on its own because whiskey naturally brings people together. Bourbon Real Talk hopes to combine the world's new passion for bourbon into an opportunity to bring people together. We will share some whiskey knowledge, some good drams, and some real talk. So sit back, pour a drink, and open your hearts and minds. You might just find yourself feeling more connected to the people in the world around you, all fueled by bourbon.
Hello, everybody out there in Bourbon Real Talk land. As you can see, we have a very different background for you today, and that is because we are at Garrison Brothers Distillery in Texas.
Texas,
Texas, right. Very exciting, and we are here with the master distiller, Donnis Todd, and we are in one of the rick houses. Do you even get to come here if you're on a tour? This is like...
No, we don't. We don't bring the tours out.
Yeah,
this is Barrel Barn Dose.
This is Barrel Barn Dose. You get to see Barrel Barn 1, which is basically a party barn at this point when you come out here, but we are super behind the scenes. And what do we have here? This is...
All right, so these, we have 77 barrels here, and I hope most of them end up making the cut, and it will be Balmorhea 2020 release. So next year when I release Balmorhea, some of these barrels will make the cut. I figured we need something to enjoy on camera, and I haven't tasted Balmorhea 2020. This is the second barrel. So what I did was I took some great 4-year-old barrels that I thought could handle a little more wood, a little more oak, and dumped 110 barrels that were 4 years old and filled 77 brand new oak barrels. And we're going to let them sit here another year. So this is the second barrel, and it's been here since March. So we'll draw us a sample. Just to forewarn you, it's going to be around 115 proof. So little baby sips, all right?
Oh, that's no problem for me.
Okay.
I like to rock it pretty high proof.
Cool. So what I'm going to do is just run a hole on the very top here to let it catch your breath. You might be able to hear it.
Okay, there we go.
And then right down here, we'll catch some.
You hear that? That is something. Wow.
And we'll just plug it up there with those little oak plugs. Give it a little tap. The bourbon will swell that right up. Won't even leak.
Awesome. All right, let's see if we can do-si-do around. We've got some new mics. Just want to give a fat shout out to Bill Fullerton, who recommended I get some mics that didn't cover up everyone's faces. So did some testing with this week.
It might have been worth keeping the old one for this one. That might have not been a bad deal for your viewers.
Oh, I don't know about that. Cheers.
Salute.
So what I'd like to point out first off is the color that we have on this. Swear to God, folks, here, let me hold it up close so you can see. It looks like coffee. That's right. And so that is actually kind of an interesting side note. So this would be kind of like a double oak. So you age it once in a barrel, then you put it in a second brand new first fill barrel. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep. So my Balmorhea is just a double barrel bourbon. There's lots of different terms, but you nailed it. It aged in one barrel. We dumped that bourbon out. Instead of going to glass, we put it in a second brand new oak barrel and re-barreled it. Some folks call it re-racking. You know, you could go on and on and on, but we're just aging that bourbon a second go around in a brand new oak barrel that's charred.
Okay. All right. So let's smell it up. So first off, with as dark as it is, I'm getting some characteristics on this that you would expect. So I'm getting some coffee notes. I'm getting some dark chocolate notes.
Yeah, I get a huge ganache on it. It's one of my favorite things.
And I'm getting some cinnamon, maybe.
Yeah, there's some cinnamon notes in there.
And it's okay to disagree with me.
It turns into like a baking spice.
Yeah,
for
like
me.
it's spicy.
Yeah, more of a, you know.
So let's taste it up.
That's just heaven right there.
Yeah.
The depth is just amazing.
Yeah, and
tons of layers.
The viscosity on this, very thick. Now, when you guys bottle the Balmorhea, it's non-chill filtered, right?
Correct. So what we're enjoying, Balmorhea 2020 will be this, just with a little more aging in that second barrel. I'm going to dump. There's 77 there. Not all 77 will make the cut.
Right.
I hope to get 70-ish. But we'll let the barrels make that decision.
Right.
The taste of those barrels. But for conversation, let's just say 70 make the cut. We'll dump those 70, and it will go straight to the bottler. No filtration, and we'll leave it at that strength. I'm hoping it will be around 115 proof. So I went into the first barrels lower to help achieve that. So I didn't end up with this 144 something after 5 years of Texas aging, 4 in one and 1 in the other. Very easy to make a very high strength, cask strength bourbon here in our intense heat. So I purposely entered the barrel at a lower proof, the White Dog, initially.
Right.
So I'm hoping it ends up around 115 proof. We will not filter it. We will not water it down. It will be this, just in a bottle.
So I know that some distilleries have a initial filtration. It's not chill filter, but they run it through just to pick out the larger pieces of sediment and stuff that come off inside the barrel. Do you guys do that?
So Balmorhea is a little different than our small batch bourbon or a single barrel. You come out to the ranch, select a barrel, buy every bottle from that barrel. When those get dumped, they go down through the dumping tank, has some cheesecloth and some stainless steel mesh. And then from the tank, between the tank and the bottler, we have an upright pleated cartridge filter, a 1 micron filter, puts a little shine, picks up char dust, things like that. Balmorhea, cowboy bourbon, those two don't go through that process.
Gotcha. So it's straight from the barrel. A
bottle of Balmorhea, a bottle of cowboy, you can pick it up, look down in the bottom. It's been sitting, so it's going to fall out. There's going to be something on the bottom. You'll find a little char, a little swirl, because I'm running it through nothing.
Right. And whiskey nerds like that.
That's right. I love it. I think we're giving folks an opportunity to taste exactly what a wheated double barrel Texas bourbon made in high Texas is.
Right.
I'm not changing that.
Right.
And the barrel has done all of these great things to it. Why should I water it down or filter something out? I want that. It's all about the relationships and the experience.
Right.
And I want to give folks the experience that you and I are having right now, and I get every day when I come out here and taste barrels. I want to pass that experience along. And that's why I don't water it down. That's why I don't filter the cowboy, this double barrel Balmorhea.
Gotcha.
Just authentic.
Yeah. So I've had a couple opportunities to taste barrels in aging facilities. And whenever they pull the samples out, depending on how they pull them, if they pull them out with a thief, you don't get as much char. But I don't know what it's called, but there's this little cup on a chain that you can drop down in there.
Yes.
And you can kind of bob it and mix it all up and all that. And I got one that had all this char in it. And I mean, it was just to me, it was a more authentic experience. And so I think that as whiskey nerds out there, we want that. We want to taste what you guys taste when you are sampling your barrels and deciding what you're going to do with them, so that makes it even more exciting. So let's talk a little bit about the history of Garrison Brothers. How long have you guys been in operation? All
right. Garrison Brothers, Dan and Charlie Garrison founded Garrison Brothers officially back in 2005. They spent several years before that, dotting I's and crossing T's and meeting the right people, writing a business plan, and put it all in motion in 2005. And Dan received his federal permit in December of 2007.
Gotcha. And I've referred to you guys as the is kind of the leader, the first of Texas whiskey distillers. Are you guys actually the first of the modern era? Or?
Yeah, we're the first people to make bourbon whiskey in Texas. We were not the first to go to the shelf. Chip did that at Balcones. But the first time I ever met Chip is he came to Garrison Brothers, and I think he was a professor somewhere at Waco or something. And he told Dan and I, hey, I'm going to build my own stills, and I'm going to make whiskey. And we're like, that's great. The world, that we need more people making whiskey. It is such an enjoyable treat. More the better.
Right.
And he went off, and hell yeah, he did. He did a great job. And he wasn't kidding when he said he was really going to build his own stills. I mean, that man physically built his own stills.
Wow.
But Chip did go to shelf with a product before we sold any bourbon. So what are you calling first? First one on the shelf, first one to fill a barrel. So, you know, and I don't really get into all that.
No, I don't think it's a competition.
To answer your question, we were the first people that legally were making bourbon whiskey in Texas. But we were not the first to shelf. Tate did that for damn sure.
Yeah. Well, and I bring that up because I've had the opportunity to meet the licorice family from Iron Root. I've interviewed Jared Hempstead. I've talked with the distiller and the distillery manager at Lone Elm. And what has been really remarkable for me is the family feel of the Texas whiskey industry. Everybody, like, in fact, I think that everybody that I've talked to has at some point come here to train with you or Dan, or to get pointers at least. And, you know, as a real estate agent, I mean, I think about, like, you know, I've spent time training my competitors and what's the wisdom in that and things like that. But you guys are really more like a family that are all working towards a common goal.
Definitely.
Would you say that's the case?
I definitely feel that, and I surely hope it is. I hope all the other Texas distilleries and distillers feel the same way. We are pushing the envelope, moving the needle of what Texas distilleries, whiskey, bourbon, and many other categories is. And we're doing that together.
Right.
And there's plenty of consumer dollars. There's plenty of people to enjoy it. We don't need to be in competition. That's my humble opinion.
Right.
And it's made for enjoyment and moderation. And the more people producing these amazing Texas products is helping all of us.
Sure.
We just, you know, we're all out there educating people, showing people what Texas can do. And the more people that are doing that, it's better for me. It's better for everybody. So I sure hope that other folks think it is, you know, we're one team, we're Texas.
Absolutely. And one of the other things that I've noticed is I'll say this on camera, until I went out to Iron Root, I was kind of a Kentucky whiskey snob. Mostly collected Kentucky bourbons, collect some rye from here and there. And I was asked by a liquor store to go out and to do a barrel selection for the store at Iron Root. And I was like, I don't really drink Texas whiskey. But once I got out there and I looked people in the eyes and I saw what they had built, and I saw the effort that they were putting in and the uphill battle that they were facing and all the passion that it takes to go through all of that to begin with, it changed the way my mind perceived what it was that they were doing. And it opened up my mind to be able to judge the whiskey for how it tasted, and not just based on, you know, what my preconceived notions were. Right. And so what I've kind of started to discover is that Texas, and this is a wine industry term, kind of is starting to develop its own terroir, right? So terroir, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's the concept that the place affects the flavor of the wine. I've been told that it's also a term used in the chocolatier world. So the idea of what's the elevation of where the grapes are grown, and what's the soil composition, what's the average rain yield per year, what's the average barometric pressure, you know, all of these things affect the way that that plant affects the flavor of the grapes. And people believe that you can taste the place. That's terroir. Do you think that Texas is starting to develop a terroir in the whiskey industry?
100%. And then even within Texas, just like in the wine industry and, you know, the different regions, within that region, you have your own platform so you have your own taste. And I believe that wholeheartedly. I mean, what we're doing here in High, you could take all of this and move it to Waco, move it to Stephenville, and, you can move it all over you want. It's going to taste a little different. Our water and our grains and, on and on and on. It's just going to act a little different. Mm-hmm. So it's how we have so many awesome expressions within our state is because of that. It's everyone's water is a little different. We're all, so I agree with that 100%.
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about your processes. So first off, let's start off with your grain. So your bourbons are made with white corn, red wheat, and barley. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we do a wheated mash bill. It's a 2-row red soft winter wheat. For the last 2 years, all the grains have been from Texas. The corn has always been all Texas grown. It's a #1 white food grade corn. So right now it's currently coming out of Hondo, Casterville, San Antonio area is where the white corn's coming from. For years and years, all of our white corn and what we're enjoying and what we have enjoyed since 2010, everything that we've packaged up to this point was all corn that came from Dallam County up by Hereford, Muleshoe, part of Texas. So, and we use a barley malt, which is now coming also from Texas and getting malted up in Fort Worth at Tex Malt. Okay. So it's really fun that all 3 grains are finally all from Texas. We just haven't sold any of that bourbon yet.
Yeah, it's still aging.
Yeah. In the early years, we grew as much of our own wheat as we could across the hard road there. We have a couple hundred acres that we try to grow wheat. Some years weather doesn't cooperate, and some years we just we just can't grow enough for our own need. So we have bought it out, from all over.
Right.
And barley malt too. There was many years that barley came from the Pacific Northwest, and just within the last 2 years, all the grains from Texas. We just haven't had a chance to enjoy it yet.
Right.
But we're really looking forward to that.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know if y'all caught that, but they're literally trying to grow some of their grains on premise. A lot of the distilleries that you go to, they're like acre or an acre and a half. Like they have, 200 plus acres across the street. And he made the comment before we started filming, we're just not good farmers. We're good at making whiskey. We're just not good farmers. Yeah. So we don't always have what we need, which I find that fascinating. And in a world where, people are placing a premium on, farm to table and things like that. I think it should be something that gets special attention and respect, that you guys are at least trying to grow some of your grains here on site.
Yeah. And, we're going to let the barrels
do their
decide.
Thing. Yeah.
But I earmarked the barrels where we had our corn from Dallam County and the wheat we physically grew ourselves right across the street. And, I earmarked those. I know when those barrels are coming 4, 5, 6 years old, I'm going to really keep those together. And if the barrels taste the way that I hope they do, then we'll definitely, through packaging, through social media, we're going to let people know that, hey, we grew this wheat. We're really proud of that, Right. So, we take a lot of pride, just as all Texas distilleries that you've mentioned, you've been to. We take a ton of pride that we make every single drop right here in High Texas.
Right.
You walk through, you meet my 12 operators who are busting their you-know-whats when I'm sitting in here drinking great bourbon with you, and they are proud Texans.
Right.
And they're very, very proud that we make every single drop right here. Then you add on that we actually grew that wheat, and they just bow up a little bit.
I hear you.
It's good.
And just so you know, I've been here for a couple of days. I've been around to several, locations we've eaten out, and I've told several people that I was coming to meet you. And there's a regional pride here about Garrison Brothers being from this area of Texas. I met a woman, she said, I have 17 bottles of Garrison Brothers. And she said, I don't even really drink whiskey, but I have 17. She was so proud. And there's something to that, right? But And there's actually a way to capitalize on that from a business standpoint, but the current Texas laws don't really allow us to do that. And I want to talk about that a little bit later. So we talked a little bit about your grain. Let's talk about so you use a hammer mill.
I do. So we have our mash bill is 74% corn, 15% wheat, and 11% barley malt. So we are a wheated bourbon, which is rare. Most bourbons are rye. So we pulled all the rye out and replaced it with wheat. Wheated bourbons traditionally are a little sweeter on the front of the palate.
Right.
So all of our grain gets milled through a hammer mill, not a roller mill. The reason that we use a hammer mill is it leaves a little bit of the hull from the basically the skin of the grain.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is during the 4-day fermentation process, the energy, the heat that's created during the fermentation, it lifts that and it creates this blanket,
like
a grain cap.
Yeah,
that's right. And that just helps me create the perfect environment for our yeast.
Mm-hmm.
And out here at the ranch, you hear it all the time. You want Dan Garrison happy, you want Donnis Todd happy, and you want our strand of yeast happy. And that grain blanket is covering 2 of those bases for sure.
That's right.
You can have the best distiller on the planet with the best palate and the best piece of equipment Vendome could ever make. But if you don't have a perfect fermentation, you don't have anything.
Right.
You have to babysit it. You got to nail that.
Mm-hmm.
And that grain blanket helps us achieve that here in our environment with our strand of yeast.
Right.
So we take all that starch, convert it to sugar. The yeast eats it, produces alcohol and CO2, open top fermentation here at the ranch. So we don't need the CO2. We're not catching it.
Mm-hmm.
We're really concerned about that ethanol being produced.
Right.
So after the 4 days of fermentation, goes on over to the still house.
Gotcha.
And we have a 2,000-gallon still, a pair of 500-gallon stills, and a little 100-gallon still.
That was your original. Right?
Our original still.
And real quick, they do use a sweet mash process and not a sour mash process. So we've talked about this a little bit before, but in Kentucky, it's almost a universally accepted practice that they take some of the spent mash from the prior batch that they've run, and they throw it into the fermentation tank for the next batch. They say that that's going to adjust the pH. At Balcones, they said they use a 7-day sour mash process, and that gives their time for the pH levels to go through the full range for them. But you guys are using a sweet mash process that's actually a 3.5 or 4-day process. And that is, from what you were telling me, with the modern technology that we have, stainless steel tanks, the modern cleaning that we have, we actually don't need the sour mash process as much as we used to.
That's right. Here at the ranch, we didn't need, we could control the environment by keeping everything clean. And our pallets, Dan and myself, the team here at Garrison Brothers,
This is Randy Sullivan with the Randall Sullivan Home Selling Team and the host of Bourbon Real Talk. Producing a podcast is time-consuming and expensive, and Bourbon Real Talk wants to maintain its integrity by not promoting products and services that it doesn't believe in. For this reason, I've opted to have my real estate team sponsor this program. The Randall Sullivan Home Selling Team has operated since 2008. We've sold almost 500 homes. We have proprietary programs that make a massive difference to the outcome of our clients, and we service the entire North Texas area. If you live in North Texas and you need to buy or sell a home, please give us a chance to explain how our services could benefit you. We understand that not all of our listeners live in North Texas. We also know that not all real estate agents are created equal. If you need a real estate agent outside of North Texas, the Randall Sullivan Home Selling Team has access to tools to help you find a highly qualified agent in your area. The service is free for you, and we stick around through the end of the process to help you with your transaction, even when we're not your agent. If you have a real estate transaction in your future, please reach out to us at randallsullivanteam.com, Facebook, Instagram, or just give us a call at 214-385-9101.
Using just 100% sweet mash with no setback and doing a 4-day fermentation, we liked the sweetness the mouthfeel, the overall profile of that distillate. Using setback or a longer fermentation process, there was negative esters from the longer fermentation process, or a flavor profile we didn't enjoy by having setback. It's a little pungent. It was a little pungent on my palate. So we didn't need it. We didn't have to worry about rogue strand of yeast or not being able to handle the pH just by keeping everything clean. And we didn't like how our distillate tasted if it wasn't with sweet mash. So it's just let's just call it the highway.
Right. And I'd like to point out to everybody out there, you know, I've heard a lot of things said about Garrison Brothers. I've never heard anyone say that it's inconsistent, right? And one of the things that they tell you when you go on tours in Kentucky is that if you use a sweet mash process, it will create an inconsistent flavor in your product. And so apparently you ever heard that story about the monkeys in the cage, and they put a banana, and when one of the monkeys tried to get it, they sprayed them all with water hoses. And then the monkeys started stopping the other monkeys from getting the banana because they didn't want to get sprayed. And then they rotated out monkeys slowly over time. And eventually there were no monkeys that had ever been sprayed. But if a monkey tried to get the banana, they would all stop the other monkey, and they didn't even know why. No one had ever experienced the negative thing that they were thinking about. There is so much of that in bourbon, and especially in Kentucky bourbon, where it's like, well, this is just how we've always done it, right?
Yeah.
And so I love it. And that's something that you guys need to realize is these Texas distillers are dealing with a completely different set of variables here with our climate and temperature, the grains that they're locally sourcing. And so they're trying to figure out for the first time in human history, how do you use what we have to create something that's beautiful, right? And when it gets done, it's not supposed to taste like the same thing that you would get from Kentucky. And we don't have a bunch of old traditions dictating to them what they're supposed to be doing. And so all of a sudden the world is your oyster, and you just have to figure out what tastes best to you and that you believe in the product. And then that's what gets taken to market.
Yeah. You know, and nothing against the way that other folks and their process. And, you know, I've been on some of those big tours, and, you know, I heard it and I was like, okay, that's fair enough. You know, it's a place like Beam Global says, hey, you know, a little bit of this mash is from the original. So that little bit of setback every time. Yeah, that's pretty cool over a couple of 100 years. I get it. It's their way. It's their tradition. It's just not ours.
Right.
And I know no Texan that's trying to make Kentucky bourbon anyways.
Right.
We're pretty damn proud.
Sure.
And we hold no punches.
Right.
I will sit right here and tell you that my goal is to make the best bourbon that's ever been made. And Texas,
regardless of state.
Yeah. Regardless of where.
Right.
And Texas deserves that. And as soon as I, you know, don't have that as my goal, Dan and Charlie need someone else sitting here next to you.
Sure.
You know, it's what we're all doing, and we're doing it our own way.
Right.
What I just love about the folks that I've had a chance to meet is we're 100% honest and transparent. We don't have anything to hide.
Right.
There's no reason to hide when you put that in someone's hand.
Right. Sure.
So that's, you know, there's no curtain.
So after you go through your sour mash, you're using Vendome for the most part.
Yep, all of our stills are Vendome stills.
And they have, and I don't fully understand this, but they have plates in them so that you can.
That's right. So we have a traditional pot still that has a rectification column that's attached to the kettle. You know, I've heard people call them hybrids, but you know, all these different things. It's just it's a pot still, and it's got 8 plates in it. It's a very traditional still to make White Dog.
Right. And so you're coming off your still, you said around 130, never more than 140, because you're trying to preserve that grain flavor.
That's right. So I really want Texas wheated bourbons to be grain forward. I believe that a bourbon should be big and bold and oily. And what helps me accomplish that is by low and slow. So legally, you can run it off at 160. Exactly. But way up there, you lose all your grain flavor, especially on my palate. It's just not there. So the 130 range, let's say 135-ish, is what I think is the sweet spot on my stills with our mash bill.
Right.
140 is, so the operators, my distillers, JD and Justin and Samantha, Jack and Russell and Rev, that's our own guideline. Yeah, you can go up to 160, but that's not the highway.
Right.
140. We don't go over 140. It loses that mouthfeel.
Mm-hmm.
It starts to get more medicinal.
Mm-hmm.
It's very crisp and dry, and that white dog isn't going to age properly in the barrels. It's not going to result the mouthfeel that I want when I start selecting barrels 4, 5, 6 years later.
Gotcha.
So that's why I like it in the 130 range. It's all about the mouthfeel for me.
Well, and I'll say this, you know, I've talked with several distillers. If you've listened, I'm like trying to get them to say that Texas whiskey is more grain forward, that you can taste more of the original grain than you can in Kentucky. It's less about the maturation process. And everybody's kind of pushed back on that a little bit and said like, no, we're just as focused on the maturation process as everybody else is. So I'm not trying to say that, but when I went out to, so Lone Elm whiskey, which is 5 Points Distilling, they also use a red winter wheat, but they're 95% red winter wheat. And so when we went out there, and I can now taste the red wheat in this because I'm used to tasting their whiskey, and it comes across as a fig molasses, and then
like a breakfast syrup, like a maple syrup for me
syrup, and
on
then
my palate.
cinnamon, and then like a cinnamon component, and maybe some raisins. It almost tastes like a port finish whiskey to me. Although these are not finished whiskeys, they're doing that with the grain. But there, they distill to the limit, up to 160. But their whiskeys are still super grain forward. But I think it's that you need this much red wheat to make this big of an impact on your palate.
Right.
And since they're using 95%, they are able to go up to that higher distillation proof and still retain a lot of the flavor because there's just so much flavor in that red wheat.
Yep. So different mash bill, and I'm sure their stills are a little different than mine.
Yeah.
And their distiller's palate is different than mine.
Sure.
Just because I don't get that grain forward at 150, 160 proof doesn't mean that someone else won't. When I'm speaking, I'm talking about my palate.
Well, right, but you have way more corn. So the point that I'm trying to make is that there's no equation. So all of these distilleries that are out there trying to make something amazing for you guys to taste, like they didn't know. They had to try it at 110. They had to try it at whatever, until they figured, oh my God, I forgot to turn that off. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, people. Sorry. Okay. And so they didn't know what the appropriate distillation proof was for their grain bill until they ran the test. And sometimes you don't even know how it's going to end up until after you've aged it for a while. And so there's a lot of trial and error. So I want you guys to understand that and respect that when you're thinking about these Texas whiskeys. So you're distilling to about 130, sometimes up to 140. What is your barrel entry proof?
All right. And that was a great lead.
Uh-huh.
We filled barrels at a wide range for the first 10 years to age barrels to then get it back out and see what we enjoyed. So we filled barrels from 110 proof all the way up to the 124.9, 125 being can't go over 125. And there was 2 proofs that consistently was enjoyed straight out of the barrel, right around 114 proof and right around 124. So of the 18,000 barrels that I have aging on the ranch, it's about 70-30 right now. About 70% is 124 proof, and about 30% is, and that's general percentages. It's not 70.0. Is about 114 proof.
Okay.
And it took us time to learn that.
Right.
The 110s and the 107s, they were a little flat. They were a little, not Texas.
Right.
Not big enough, not bold enough. And, the 124 just is, it's Texas. It's big, it's bold. It gives me a huge platform to work with. I can always bring it down with some rainwater, but it gives me that ability to take a 15-gallon barrel and let it survive 6-7 Texas summers, get 1 or 2 gallons back out, but have this 148 proof bomb.
Right.
So it gives us a beautiful platform to do things that no one else is doing.
Right. Now let's talk about your water supply here, because obviously it's different for everyone.
Yeah, we have a ton of different waters for sure. Let's start with the actual, we call it well number one or mash well. So the water is a crazy hard, tons of limestone, no iron, and it is the water we use to fill our mash cooks.
Okay.
So our cookers.
So that's what you cook with.
That's right. That raw,
unfiltered,
well,
filtered
raw,
by the earth.
Well,
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, and it'll ruin a water heater in a month. You would never wash your hair in it. It literally is only good to make bourbon whiskey.
But it makes the yeast happy.
Oh, yes, it does. And we're right back. That's right. So all of those ground deposits, my yeast just love.
Yeah.
So that's well number one. That's all it gets used for. I use a company out of San Antonio that come and test all of our water sources every week. And I have them test that just so I want to make sure it's not changing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the state of Texas required us to put in a public water system. We don't have public water, so we had to drill a well to the state of Texas specs because we have visitors that come and visit us. So the state of Texas required us to have a public water system. So this well was dug and cased all within the specs that the state of Texas said because we have visitors.
Mm-hmm.
We call that our PWS well. And that's what goes to all the bathrooms, all the hose bibs, and it is a chlorinated water.
Mm-hmm.
It gets filtered and chlorine gets added. You have to have so many parts per million at the farthest spot. So in case a tourist comes to visit us and decides to drink out of a toilet, it's chlorinated. You can thank Texas for that, folks.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Texas.
really protecting the state government, all right? So that's the second water source.
Mm-hmm.
We have a reverse osmosis machine that will clean up some well water
Mm-hmm.
to feed our boilers for maintenance type water,
Mm-hmm.
let's call it. And then we have a fourth water, rainwater.
Mm-hmm.
So all the facilities here at the ranch have the ability to collect rainwater. We have a little over 200,000 storage gallon capabilities. I use that rainwater when all the tanks are full. We use it for everything except what the state of Texas says has to have chlorine in it.
Mm-hmm.
So everything's using rainwater except our mash cooks and where the public can get. But as it dries up here in Texas, I start defending the rainwater because that's what I cut all my aged bourbon down. If bourbon gets proofed here at the ranch, I'm using rainwater
Mm-hmm.
and all of my white dog, all of my raw distillate. So I run off a 24-hour, I have about 700-800 gallons in that 135-ish, and I want to put it in the barrel at 124 proof. I need to lower that.
Right.
I'm going to use rainwater to do that.
Gotcha. And
So those are all my waters.
is there like a reverse osmosis system that you put the rainwater through? Or
The rainwater just goes through 12 filters and a UV light, to make sure there's
bacteria,
no.
yeah.
That's right, to make sure, and it also gets tested every single week. All the waters get tested every week.
I don't think I've ever heard that before. Do you know of anybody else that's using rainwater?
I don't. I always hate to say we're the only one because then someone pings you and
Yeah.
And like, so what do you call it? So I'm not going to say we are. I just haven't heard of it, but obviously you or I haven't heard
That's
of everybody. But I think it's
awesome.
pretty unique.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And the reason we did that was, why manipulate this?
sure.
You
You want to talk about terroir?
Yeah.
We're literally tasting the rain that fell
right.
in this place in Texas.
and the groundwater is crazy hard. It makes great mash. It makes my yeast really happy. But I couldn't imagine
What it
putting
would
that
taste
in
like,
my aged bourbon.
Yeah.
It would totally change the profile.
Wow.
So in reverse osmosis water, we make a little bit to feed our boiler if we don't have enough rainwater on hand. But RO machines are just rude to Mother Earth, the reject rate and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So rainwater, it's pretty easy to collect. It's basically free, and it's not going to manipulate all the work that we accomplished here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy on my equipment.
Wow.
The tubes in my boilers, they like nice, soft, clean water.
Huh.
So it's good for the equipment. It's great for the bourbon.
That is awesome. And so once you're done, you've proofed it down to your barrel entry proof point. You are using, for the most part, 25-gallon barrels. Is that correct?
So we have 30-gallon barrel mill barrels.
Mm-hmm.
I have K25s. I have some Black Swans that are 24s. So around here, you hear people say 30 gallon, 30 gallon, 30 gallon. We're really clumping 3 barrel sizes together just for ease of conversation. Those 3 sizes are 30, 25, and 24.
Gotcha.
And I also use 15 gallon barrels.
Okay.
So what we're enjoying is a 25 gallon barrel. And directly behind us, those are some 30 gallon barrels.
Right.
So most of my inventory falls into that 30 gallon
range.
And
then how old is your for your main product lines? Because you've got regular Garrison Brothers and
my small batch.
Your small batch. And then, of course, you have single barrels. You've got Cowboy, and then some special releases like Balmorhea and things like that. Did I miss any of your main lines?
No, okay.
I mean, so Cowboy. What is Cowboy bottled at? What's it?
So it's cask strength, and it's a very small.
That's right, because that one's non-filtered.
That's
everything.
Right. Yep. And I marry 100-ish barrels together, and every year it's a little different. This year is going to be about 133-ish proof. I've had some 138, some 137s. So, and it's a real combination of very unique barrels. So like the one that we're going to bottle this year, the 2019 Cowboy, 70 of the barrels that I started that batch with were 2012 15-gallon barrels. And so I filled them with 15 gallons. They survived 7 Texas summers. Most of them I only got 1 or 2 gallons back out of.
Wow.
So intense, so enriched. I mean, just boom, it's all over your palate. And then I put, on top of that, I put some 25-gallon and some 30-gallon 6-year-old barrels on top of it that really rounded it out and just made it real enjoyable, approachable. So it's hard to give you an age.
Right, yeah.
And just so folks, I'm not ashamed of the age of our bourbon. I'm very, very proud of our bourbon because I personally hand select every single barrel. I taste it and decide if we're going to use it. So our small batch, those barrels are somewhere between 4 and 5.5. But I don't pick them because they're between 4 and 5.5. I pick them because I think it's a great representation of a Texas wheated bourbon from high Texas.
Right.
It's sweet on the front, holds through the middle of the palate. It's warming. I like a little kick. I think Texas should have a little kick. It doesn't get on the side of my palate. I don't get bad goosebumps. I get good ones.
Right.
And so, but again, we're talking about my palate. You may taste and get none of that. And we're just not real big about this 4 years, 6 years. I'm not trying to make a 23-year-old bourbon. I'm trying to make the best Texas wheated bourbon that can be produced.
Well, let's side note that for a second. So let's talk about ages in Texas. Do you have an idea what your average angel share is per year?
Yeah, we're it depends on those barrel sizes, but a very
This is Randy Sullivan with RSHST Capital LLC and the host of Bourbon Real Talk. Producing a podcast is time-consuming and expensive, and Bourbon Real Talk wants to maintain its integrity by not promoting products or services that it doesn't believe in. For this reason, I have opted to have my funding company sponsor this program. RSHST Capital is the first of its kind funding company that provides pay-at-close funding to home sellers out of their equity. If you have a home to sell, need money for renovations or repairs to maximize your profit, money to stop pending foreclosure or to keep your mortgage current, or cash for really anything, then look into RSHST Capital. This program is simple. We verify that you have equity, approve you for a funding amount. You have access to that cash at practically a moment's notice for only a nominal fee. This program is raising sellers cash after closing by tens of thousands of dollars, stopping foreclosures and changing people's financial future. You pick your real estate agent, your contractor, and have access to actual cash or contracting expenses with zero upfront cost. This is a nationwide program, so if you have any curiosity about how it works, please look us up at rshstcapital.com, Facebook, or just give us a call at 214-385-9101.
10 to 15% evaporation is fair.
Right.
Is very fair. On the higher side, those 15s are smaller barrels. And there's other factors. So as you sit here, you feel this breeze. That's our predominant wind. I've had the barn set up to get New Era makeup around the barrels. Part of New Era makeup is that the wind that we feel is wicking away my bourbon. It intensifies, increases the angel share, the evaporation, because of all that New Era makeup. But what's left in there is amazing. So I'm even adding to this Texas heat by the way that we set the barns up.
Gotcha.
But then I have some barns that are another direction, so it's not as much. So we could put a smaller barrel in there so you don't have as much evaporation, but the overall profile of that barrel tastes extremely different. But I may use those for some single barrels that are smaller barrels, give people an opportunity so they can afford a whole barrel of whiskey. And it's unique. It doesn't taste like Cowboy. It doesn't taste like Garrison Brothers small batch. Single barrel is a great way for folks to experience difference within its own brand.
Right.
So there's a method to the madness. So it's hard for me to give you, I mean, you go down to Kentucky and they'll tell you 3%.
Right.
There's no conversation after that. And you're like, wow, okay. It's extremely different here on the ranch. It's kind of self-inflicted.
Right.
And we built a distillery where it gets really, really hot.
Right.
So 10 to 15 is fair.
I'm trying to educate people about, this one. That was the one piece of information that shocked me when I started talking with Texas distilleries. When you go to Balcones, they tell you 3 to 5% per year, right? Well, if you're experiencing, somewhere between 3 and 5 times as much angel share loss per year, you can't have the same age statements as you would from the other region. It just you couldn't. There would be no bourbon left. What was left would be terrible, right?
It'd be like a soggy toothpick.
And so, for a distillery in Texas to consistently be producing 5, 6, 7-year-old whiskeys, that is phenomenal. I mean, the amount of money that they are losing to angel share.
You got it.
And the rapidity with which they can pull flavor out of that barrel, because one, they're using smaller barrels, right? So there's greater contact between the wood and the distillate that's in the barrel. And two, things age faster in the hotter heat, right? So we're getting more interaction with the wood just because our environment says so. And so don't get caught up on Texas age statements, people. Same thing happened to the Kentucky bourbon industry when people started trying to convert over from Scotch. They're like, what, it's not 30 years old? And in Kentucky, they're like, well, it kind of starts to taste funny after 12 years. Like, we wouldn't want to make a 30-year whiskey here. And now Texas is battling the perception that's been created by the Kentucky bourbon market that somehow if it's not 10 or 12 years old, that it's not good. Well, if you have 15% angel share and you age for 10 years, what's going to be left in your barrel? Nothing. It's going to be dry. It's going to be a phantom barrel. So let's not worry too much. I mean, if you go crack open a 12-year-old barrel in Kentucky, it's not going to look like this, people. They are not having a problem getting flavors out of that barrel.
Yep.
This used to be clear as water, okay? And now it looks like coffee. Yep. So for those of you that are listening, I'm holding up the glass to the camera, and you can see it literally looks like there's coffee in my cup.
Extraction definitely is not an issue here in Texas, definitely not in high Texas.
Right.
We have plenty of extraction because of that accordion process that you just explained. We're getting big swings in heat temperatures. It gets really, really hot here. It creates a ton of pressure. You get a ton of penetration. So we're extracting things from that white American oak that becomes part of our bourbon that you're not going to get in other locations. And that's part of the mouthfeel, and that's part of Texas.
Right. Right. And so we talked a little bit about aging. We talked about your barrel differences. We've talked about your different product lines. Let's talk a little bit about pricing.
Okay.
So one of the complaints that I get as I've started to encourage people to enjoy more Texas whiskey is that it's just so expensive. And so of the distilleries that I've talked to, I only know of 2, maybe 3 that are actually profiting at this point. And so talk with us about economies of scale, how you guys price your products out in the market, things like that.
Yeah.
So that the people don't understand. You're not doing this because you drive a Maserati, okay?
Yeah.
You don't ride a helicopter into work. You're not getting rich out of your mind. It just costs a little bit more to make whiskey the way we're making it here in Texas. Is that fair?
It's very fair, and definitely not sidestepping you. But I mean, I have the dream job.
Mm-hmm.
I get to make all this bourbon with great people in a beautiful setting, and I don't have to worry about one clear window. Dan takes care of all of that. I am the luxury of just getting to make the bourbon. I don't have to figure out, focus, and find a way to pay for it all.
Right.
I do not have to do that. But I can look dead in that camera and tell you, Garrison Brothers has not turned a profit. And I've worked for Dan coming up on 12 years. That is a huge commitment from the Garrison family to put so much of their resources into this to make the best product that possibly can be made. And we don't cut corners. We only buy the best.
Right.
Are we going to make money someday? Of course we are. But don't think because of our price point, we're all driving those Maseratis. We're not.
Right.
You wouldn't even ride my truck out here. You brought your own car.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not trying to sidestep it. I'm really not. Out on the trail, I get to go and do some bottle signings, bourbon dinners, and things like that. I have a quick little line where I say, hey, I get to make the bourbon. I don't make the price.
Right.
And it's 100% honest. I don't set the price. There's a lot that goes into that. That evaporation and what we're paying. And because we're very small, we pay a premium for our glass. We pay a premium for everything. We don't have an inventory from our great-grandfather and our grandfather and our dad. So we started with nothing, so all of those things. And then, the evaporation is a big thing. I put 30 gallons in that barrel right there. And, I'm working my way through these right now, tasting, and they're all 5 to 6 years old. And I filled those with 30 gallons, and I'm going to get 10, 9, 12 gallons back out. And, we're all great drivers, right? We pay our insurance. We pay for all the bad drivers.
Right.
Well, someone's got to pay for all this evaporation.
Sure.
It's the guy at the end.
Right.
I can't do anything about that.
Sure.
And, but again, I'm not trying to sidestep it, but
no, that's a good
there's
answer.
A lot of factors that go into it. I know it's expensive. I understand that.
But it's a bit of a luxury product too.
It
right?
is, yeah.
So there are whiskeys out there that you can buy that are cheaper from brands that have been around from just post-prohibition. They have way larger economies of scale, and that does affect pricing. But this does have a much larger flavor profile to it than your average whiskey. And, there are the consumers out there that are willing to pay for it. I had no idea that you guys weren't profitable yet. I assumed that you guys were one of the profitable ones. And that should be a real eye-opening piece of information for you all out there that's complained about pricing. There are distilleries that probably spill more whiskey per year than you guys make.
Definitely.
And they're doing everything that they possibly can to bring their products to market at an affordable price. But, they got to they've got to stop the bleeding at some point, just so that they can, build the brand and bring a good product to market. So you guys have released a very interesting product, kind of led the way in the Texas whiskey market. So let's talk a little bit about, what's happened since then. You guys are one of the, you've been working with the Texas Whiskey Association, correct? Garrison Brothers has? Garrison Brothers has, and Dan has spent a ton of time, helping with it. So, yes. And so the Texas Whiskey Association is, just that, the membership or Texas distilleries, and their objective is to help with reforms and laws that will help distilleries and also to help with, group marketing. They've created the Texas Whiskey Trail. You guys are a stop on the Texas Whiskey Trail. And so what do people get that are Texas Whiskey Trail members when they come here that they wouldn't get if they weren't a member?
Got it. So you have an opportunity. The Texas, some of their members and some of the founders, some of the folks that make the Texas Whiskey Trail actually work, came out, and with Samantha, they selected their own single barrel.
Okay.
Then a different group within the Texas Whiskey Trail, some other new members, they came back and bottled it. Mm-hmm. And that's available in our gift shop, but you have to be a card holder,
right,
or you can't buy it.
Right.
So if you don't have your Texas Whiskey Trail, you go down there, they're going to tell you, you can sign up right there, and you can buy that. So that's a pretty cool thing that it's a members only. That's pretty cool. And the members help select it. That's the biggest thing I liked about it. And then there's discounts.
Right.
You get my pricing. Mm-hmm. So it's basically 50% off everything in the gift shop. I say everything, it's not true. Experimental, some leather products, but for most part, you get what I
discounts,
pay.
Right?
Yeah, same price that they charge me for my bottle.
That's awesome.
And I think there's a discount on the flight, maybe the food. I don't know it all, but it's a heck of a deal.
So you guys may be picking up that this is a larger operation, so the master distiller is not as involved in some of the more mundane portions of the business. If you're at a smaller distillery and you ask, they're like, "Oh yeah, I set this up and this, and this." So one of the things that I observed, because you are in High Texas, which is right next door to Fredericksburg, the wine area of Texas, if you will. And so I am encouraging everybody, if you want to have a great time with your wife and she drinks wine, you definitely need to head down here to Fredericksburg. Every place has these cute little cottages that you can rent for a very inexpensive price. I don't even know how many wineries are down here now.
Ooh,
plus there's
40 plus.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. And then you can come over to Garrison Brothers.
And you can go up to Andalusia.
You can
go to Real Ale Distilling.
And there's a rum place.
High Rum.
Yeah, it's just a really great Texas-like experience. It feels a little bit like going to Napa, but not as fancy pants. It's more, it's Texas-fied, if you will, right? There's
going to be a lot more trucks in the parking lot. A lot more
trucks, and had a really good time down here. But one of the things that you'll notice when you come into these distilleries, and there's distilleries that are, they're not distilleries, these winemakers, they're doing, $20+ million a year in revenue, and they don't have a distributor, right? So we've talked about this before. In Texas, you've got the manufacturer, the distributor, the retailer, and then sometimes there's a fourth level of bars and restaurants, right? And so that's who Garrison Brothers has to go through. So if you go to a restaurant and you're buying a glass of Garrison Brothers, like I have here in my hand, Garrison Brothers had to sell it to their distributor. The distributor had to sell it to a retailer that had a Class B license. The retailer had to sell it to the bar or the restaurant, and all of those people had to cooperate to get that whiskey in your hand. If you go to one of these
and they all marked it up.
And they all marked it up. And
about 30%.
And there's taxes all along the way and all that stuff. There are some states where 60% of every dollar you spend on a bottle of liquor in a liquor store is going to taxes, right? So when you try to back out all those expenses and you see they're selling their product for $70+, if you back all that out, they're actually not getting a whole lot of money.
Yeah, we don't get $70.
Right.
Yeah, we're not getting 70.
And so when you go to these wineries, you'll find out, like, hey, if I wanted to buy this wine, what liquor stores could I find this wine in? And they go, oh, we only sell here. And you're like, wait, what? And they're like, yeah, we have a wine club membership, and we have enough people that sign up for our wine club, and we'll ship it right to your door and blah, blah, blah. Can you guys do that?
We cannot. We can sell you 2 bottles every 30 days. And you
on premise.
On premise, yeah.
You cannot mail it to me.
I can't ship. Yep. Texas doesn't allow us to ship distilled spirit. So there's, the battle on the Hill is always happening. And I don't set the agenda, what they're going to go after next. I know that, first it was the sampling law. There was the governor himself came to Garrison Brothers Distillery, and I was able to tell him, "Oh, sir, you can't taste that." And he's like, "I'm the governor. What do you mean I can't taste that?"
Well, then change the law.
It's against the law.
I could lose my license.
So
Right.
it was beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, that was a long time ago, a couple of governors back, but it was perfect. That was one of the very first things that the young Texas distillers, Dan and some other folks, that was the first thing they fought, was the sampling.
Right.
Got that changed, and then they fought direct sales, being able to sell some bottles. That helps the bottom line.
Sure.
I've heard rumors that some other things they really want to focus on is the internet sales, being able to you log on to Garrison Brothers and you buy a bottle and I ship it to you.
Right.
I don't understand why. Why can't we do that? And
Right.
it all gets into someone's not getting the cut. It's probably what it is.
And that's the bottom line, right? Because this system got set up post-prohibition under the guise that, we were trying to protect consumers from dangerous spirits. And so can you please tell the people that once you take that liquor, that whiskey, you proof it down, you put it in the bottle, you put the seal on it, who all in that chain opens up the bottle, takes a sample, and does testing on it?
Nobody.
So guess what, people? You're not being protected from dangerous spirits that are inside the bottle because no one in the chain tested. No one, right? And so the whole argument that we're supposed to be protecting the consumers with this process is absolutely a false argument from its beginning. These distilleries have such an uphill battle. First off, no one, until you guys started changing the minds of consumers, thought about Texas bourbon. So one, you got to fight against the thing that, people don't even perceive that you make this. Two, you can't even give out samples when people come to see you until that law gets changed. Three, all of your counterparts in the wine and beer industry, they have the option to build their own customer base and sell all of their products directly to consumers. You guys don't have that option.
No,
you have to go through a distributor. And what you guys don't understand is that, distributors are like, yeah, I'll carry your product, whatever. Then you got to go out and hustle to try and get the stores to carry the product. Then the store puts in an order for your product, and half the time the distributor sends them somebody else's product that they have a higher margin on or something like that, right? And so it's that whole adage of we only want to hire people with experience. And so when you're new, you can't get experience because you can't get hired, and you can't get hired because you don't have experience. You have to have case volume sales before a store is willing to take the risk of buying your inventory and putting it on their shelves and giving up valuable shelf space. There's more bourbons now than probably there have ever been.
Yeah.
And so getting that shelf space is hard to do. And the way that you get it is you get to go in and say, hey, I'm a known quantity. If you buy my product, I already have consumers out there that are going to walk into your store and they're going to want it. But how do you get that if you're not allowed to sell your product to the people who come visit you at your distillery, right?
That's right.
And so they just now changed the law recently so that you can sell 2 bottles per person. And what would be really freaking awesome is if they could do a bottle club and they could actually ship. Even if they limited it to only inside the state of Texas, that would change the game. It would make it more possible for us here in Texas to have more quality distillers out there that are able to get started because they had a way to monetize their efforts. But right now, it is a sad state of affairs in my opinion, and it just sucks that you guys can't ship your products.
Yeah, and there's a lot at play there. Anytime you talk about big old money and politics and laws, and you got a hard road,
uphill battle.
Yeah,
and that's part of what the Texas Whiskey Association is there to do, right? Is to try to get changes made to those laws so that the distilleries here in Texas are better able to compete on a grand scale. And I will tell you, I'm very excited to be sitting with the master distiller who could answer all of those super detailed questions. But originally I was going to try to meet with Dan, but I couldn't because he's off working on tariff reform. Because what you guys may not know is part of the reason why whiskey, or at least American bourbons, is not more popular throughout the rest of the world is because we don't have a lot of tariffs on whiskeys that are coming in from other countries, but other countries have a ton of tariffs on whiskeys that are flowing out of the United States into their countries. And because whiskey was not that large of an export market for us, our federal government never focused on that when they were looking at tariff reform. And now it's time. And Dan Garrison is out there, doing the hard work along with many other people to try and open up those markets. And all that's going to do is allow a distillery like this to become more profitable so that they have more markets to release product in, and it's going to lower the cost for everybody. And it's something that you as a consumer should be rooting for. So anyway, off of my soapbox. So how long have you been working here?
It'll be 12 years in December.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you've been here.
Just getting started.
Right. So you've been here almost from the point that they started production, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And what was your background before that?
I spent 10 years in the United States Air Force, and I lived in North Carolina, Korea, Japan, New Mexico. When I got out of the service, I knew that I wanted to be in the spirits industry and more within the production. My grandfather, both my parents worked. My grandfather owned a tool and die shop and told these ridiculously stories about running moonshine and making raw distillate and making corn whiskey. And every time he told the story, it was bigger than the time before. And I heard these stories my entire life. And even though I knew that there was no truth to them, I wanted to do that. I wanted to live those stories, even though I knew that they were really stretched for storytelling.
Right.
But it just kind of, the bug bit me. And when I was in the service, I just always seeked out other distilleries. I would work for free. I would just hang out. And my time had passed that I was in line with everything that the United States Air Force was telling me to do. And it was time for me to find a new career. So I started watching DSPs. And I saw Lone Star LLC get DSP, number 6. And being in the Air Force, you're going to be in Texas at some point in time. And it was my home. I loved it. I loved the people. I loved the food. Just everything about it. No matter where the United States Air Force sent me, from Baghdad to Iraq, no matter where, Kuwait, you always knew where the Texans were. They would fly a flag. And I said, I want to be on their team.
Yeah.
They are proud. No matter where the Air Force sent me. Korea, walking down, there's a little Texas flag on someone's door.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be on their team. So I watched the DSPs. I saw that Dan had filed. I started getting people to snoop around. Hey, he says he's going to make bourbon whiskey in High Texas. Perfect. So I started looking at federal jobs. Just so happened Stonewall, Texas is where Lyndon Baines Johnson lived during his presidency. So it's a federal park. I took a position, got out of the Air Force, moved to Stonewall, Texas, started raising my son there. And I literally came up here and I worked for free until Dan finally hired me. I wouldn't leave. I was like that bad penny. So I just wouldn't go away. I wasn't 100% honest with Dan on day one. I didn't want to overwhelm him, and I didn't want him to run me off.
Right.
So I just kept my mouth shut and picked up hoses and extension cords and cleaned. And I didn't go in there and start changing his mash bill and telling him how to run his still.
Right.
I had some distillation background. I had a ton of fermentation knowledge. I just kept my mouth shut and waited for my opportunity. It took about 3 months, and I convinced him that he couldn't do this without me. We all know he could have. So when I say I'm truly blessed and I have the best job in the world, I really, really do. I work for great people. I don't have to worry about how to pay for it all. I get to make bourbon whiskey every day for Texans.
That's awesome.
That's hard to beat.
That is awesome. All right. Well, I think that's a good point for us to wrap it up on. Is there anything that people need to know about Garrison Brothers that we haven't already shared?
The biggest takeaway for me is give it a shot. Don't be so focused that it's not a 53-gallon barrel, that it's not 23 years old. just give it a shot.
Mm-hmm.
And do that for all bourbons.
Yeah.
It is a big, big pool. Why just pick one thing and that's all you drink and you defend it like you made it? Get out there and enjoy brown spirits.
Mm-hmm.
They're made to be enjoyed, to build legendary stories and relationships. Just great bourbon, great people, great stories. Be willing to try something different.
And I'm going to go one step further and not just try the brown spirit. I want you to start going to these Texas distilleries and going on their tours. It'll change the way you feel about the people, right? Because really it's about the people. When you see that when you look in someone's eyes, that's just, they're working on a bottling line or whatever. Of course, this place is small enough. You probably have to do everything when you worked here. But, you look at somebody that's working at these distilleries, they sacrificed to be a part of something that they felt like was bigger than themselves. And it will give you an appreciation for that liquor that's in that bottle that you've never had before. So get out there and visit. Now, you guys do have a gift shop, kind of visitor center. You do tours.
We do, yeah.
Do you guys have any of those cute little cottages on location?
No, there's no. So you really get into a big ball of wax there when you have a federal rectifier's permit, when you have a DSP. You're not allowed to have any other businesses on property.
Okay, I didn't
know. It really limits what you're allowed to do.
That's more bullshit because all of the wineries around here all have on-premise places for you to stay, and more bullshit. Anyway,
it's just silly.
But I forgot to tell you my podcast is explicit, so you can cuss if you want to.
I think I've been pretty good. I don't know though.
We didn't say anything until I said bullshit.
Yeah, I don't know if I have or not.
Yeah.
So.
Anyway, so need to come visit. If they want to get more information about what you guys are doing, GarrisonBrothers.com, is that the website?
Yes, sir. Yep.
GarrisonBrothers.com.
So Garrison Bros, BROS. GarrisonBros.com.
Garrison Bros.
And we're in High Texas. We have all the social media stuff, the Facebook, the Instagram. You got it.
Twitter.
They got it all. That's right.
Yeah, check it out on there. And if you want more information about Bourbon Real Talk, you can find me at my website, bourbonrealtalk.com. On there's an opportunity for you to fill out a web form to give me some show ideas or feedback. You can also subscribe to my podcast there. You can find me on all podcast players, including the podcast app on iPhone and Google Play, Stitcher, so on and so forth. You can find me on YouTube. I am on Facebook /Bourbon Real Talk and on Instagram /Bourbon Real Talk. And if you have any show ideas or suggestions, you want to tell me I suck, you want to say thank you, whatever, you can do all of that on there, and I would love to hear from you. So as always, I love you guys, and I'll talk to you next time on Bourbon Real Talk. Cheers.
Thank you.
Sir?